Listeners, welcome to the What is Nerd podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Dietz, and I'm here with my buddy, Nick Grant.
Hey man, happy to be here. Let's talk about some Batman.
Let's do it. And I'm also here with JP Cochran. Can't forget about him. How's it going, JP?
Good. I just was hoping not to be forgotten about.
We couldn't possibly forget about you because you complete our triangle. So we got three of us representing different types of nerdiness. I'm up at the top, Nick's in the middle, JP's way down at the bottom. In fact, JP's so far down at the bottom that despite the fact that he was supposed to read some Batman comics this week, he refused. He said no.
Well, life got in the way.
Okay.
But who says no to Batman? I mean, it's like I feel like it'd be one thing if it was like Sailor Moon, but I mean this is Batman, dude.
Yeah, Batman's the best. But we'll catch you up, JP. The point of the show, in fact, is to serve as an introduction to all things nerd, including comics, anime, video games, science fiction, and fantasy, etc. If you enjoy what you hear, like us on our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, and Instagram. We're on Instagram now. Both of those are at whatisnerd1. Also, if you haven't yet, subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or Google Play, and leave us a rating or review if you're able. Also, if you never listened to our other show, What is Sports, before, check it out. We talk about competitive eating this week. Finally, if you have any comments or questions, send us an email at winerdcast@gmail.com. So, let's get into it. We're talking about Batman. JP, you've heard of this guy, right?
I've heard of the Bat woman. Wait, whoa. Who was I thinking? Catwoman.
Catwoman. Oh my God, you confused Catwoman with Batwoman. Oh my
God.
God.
There really is a Batwoman?
There is a Batwoman, yes.
And there's a Catwoman.
Who did Halle Berry play?
Halle Berry is the Catwoman. There is also a Batwoman, and they're actually making a new CW show about her.
What's her face? There was one that was made. Anne Hathaway. Who was she?
She was also Catwoman.
Oh, okay.
And also Michelle Pfeiffer was Catwoman back in the 92 Batman movie.
Yeah, were there any other Catwomen?
There's been a lot of Catwomen. There was the one in the 1960s Batman show. They actually cast a different Catwoman in the 1960s Batman movie. That's all I can think of, though. I think there's a third one. I don't remember.
But no, I like Batman. Batman is one of when I think of my superheroes, I think of Batman, Spider-Man, and Superman.
Cool.
Yeah. So to me, those are the big three.
Yeah, I would agree. Those are the three best, in my opinion.
And I like Batman also. I'm sorry, because he is just he doesn't have any superpowers. I didn't really think of it until someone brought that up, years ago.
That's right. He's a rich guy with gadgets,
Right. Yeah.
He's strong and he's smart.
He's
a jack of all trades.
He gives the regular man hope.
What was your earliest exposure to Batman, JP?
As a kid, watching some Batman cartoon, I had Batman.
Okay.
I had Batman action figures.
Cool.
Actually.
All right. So Nick, what about you? What's your relationship with Batman?
Probably like JP said, watching the cartoons. I remember watching them on Cartoon Network and some other networks, and I watched those a lot. And as a kid, kids are just drawn to superheroes in general, and I really liked Batman, so I had a lot of toys and watched the shows, and I had Batman pajamas, and it just was really cool. So it was like Batman. Plus, I liked the movies too; they were fun.
Yeah, and I love the Batman movies, love the cartoon. But honestly, today we are not here to talk about the movies. Specifically, I kind of selected some comics that would be a good introduction to Batman. So listeners, these comics are listed in the show notes. We also posted them in the episode before this. I suggest reading these if you haven't yet. They're available through the DC Universe app. You do have to pay for a subscription, but I believe you can get like a free trial or something like that. But it's a cool app. You can get like most of the DC Comics library like on your tablet or phone. So it's a pretty neat app, worth checking out if you're into comics. But so I've selected some early Batman comics. We got Detective Comics number 27. We got Detective Comics number 33 and Batman issue 47. All these came from like the Golden Age era, which we covered in our What is Comics episode, but it's back in like the 30s and 40s. The next one that I selected is Batman Year One, which is a really famous graphic novel by Frank Miller. It came out in 1987. One after that is going to be The Killing Joke by Alan Moore. It came out in 1988, another iconic Batman comic book. And then finally we wrap it up with The Man Who Laughs by Ed Brubaker, which came out in 2005. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Now, JP, I know that you didn't read the comics, but Nick and I are going to kind of recap and reflect on some of these comics. Maybe you can learn a little bit about the origins of Batman and where he came from and all that stuff that you didn't know already. So, Nick, this is your first time reading a Batman comic ever, right?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so the first one that we read is Detective Comics number 27. This is Batman's first ever appearance, ever. So Detective Comics existed before Batman. And Nick, did you look at the other like stories in the comic? The other stories?
I didn't, but it was just this Batman comic. It was just weird. It's just really fast paced, and you could tell it was dated, and it was really corny. And I almost felt like I could hear like some 1930s. And then there's Batman flying to save the day, like guy, as he was like narrating the story. It just seemed that is just how it felt, and maybe it's because I knew it was an old comic, and everybody smoked in that thing. Like it starts off like Bruce Wayne's like going to town on a pipe.
You got Bruce Wayne on a pipe. You got Commissioner Gordon on a cigar, and then they go to like the murder room, and Bruce Wayne's still hanging onto that pipe at the place where the murder happened.
Everyone.
It was
a different time though. It was a different time, but still, like that's all they did. They were smoking. I think Batman even smoked in a little image. Like I think he's like, hey, you criminals. He's like taking a puff. It was ridiculous.
What's funny is I could imagine the script, right? Because they have this one title right here. It says, "The Commissioner and Bruce Wayne speed towards the Lambert residence," right? And it shows a picture of the car zooming down the road. Now, they didn't have to write that caption. You're looking at a picture of a car zooming down the road. So it's like they took the script, whatever someone wrote, and they just put the script on the page, and they just drew pictures to go with the script.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about. Like, I felt like there was there's Batman, I'm an announcer. Like, that's how it had that vibe to it.
He punches a guy, and it says, Batman sends the burly criminal flying through space, and there's a picture of him, like, punching the guy.
Yeah.
And the guy flying over the railing or whatever.
Yeah, and it was really short. The main story is there's been a murder, and basically it turns out there's these former business partners, and they hired hitmen to kill these other guys, so the main guy would have full control of the company, I guess, basically. And one thing I wrote down, I noticed and I put this in my notes, is that guy you're talking about where Batman punched him into space. So they're in a chemical factory, basically, and Batman, he's confronting the main villain. He figured out it was this guy. He punches him. He falls in acid, and like nobody cares. They're like, he's dead in acid. Well, I'm glad I saved the day. And Commissioner Gordon's like, oh, that Batman did it again. And like it's like nobody cares.
So the guy who Batman rescues, because Batman goes and rescues one of the guys that this crazy businessman's trying to kill, one of his business partners. So Batman saves him, and he's like, he's fixing to arrest this business owner, and the business owner pulls out a gun. And Batman, sock, punches him right in the face. It literally says sock right there on the page. Bam. Yeah. And it says he's falling right into a tank of acid. And the guy falls down, and the Batman goes, a fitting end for his kind.
Yeah.
And then he...
it's like, man, that's pretty intense, Batman.
Yeah. And then he disappears, and it's all good. Batman saved the day. And at the very end, we learn that this...
that crime doesn't pay.
Yes, and that this Batman character, right, this mysterious Batman character who showed up out of nowhere, is actually the same guy that Commissioner Gordon was having a cigar with in the first page of the issue. It's that rich dude, Bruce Wayne. So you learn all that in the first Batman comic. That's Batman. That's Detective Comics number 27. Yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed it, Nick. It's a trip.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'd say the next one's even crazier. So we got Detective Comics number 33. And so this is the first exposure that we get to Batman's origin.
Wait, I have a question. So does this all start at Detective Batman number 1, I guess?
No. So like I said, Detective Comics number 27 was the very first Batman appearance. So Detective Comics actually had a bunch of stories in them.
I see what you're saying.
But it's like, so there'd be like there's different superheroes. There might be like a Zorro comic thrown in there, or there might be like, just cops solving crimes, or like a private detective or whatever. So Batman was just a featured character in those. But then obviously when
he got his own gig.
Yeah, because he came out and everyone just wanted to read about Batman. So he eventually kind of became his own thing. So the second comic that we read, Detective Comics number 33, we get a hint at Batman's origin story. So it starts off with a flashback that Batman's having of his parents being shot, and that's that classic scene that we know. They're leaving the theater, and this guy comes up and he goes, Bruce Wayne's dad goes, "Well, what is this?" This guy has a gun. He goes, "A stick-up, buddy. I'll take that necklace you're wearing, lady." And then he shoots both of the parents. Little Bruce Wayne's upset. He goes home and he swears an oath. He says, "And I swear by the spirit of my parents to avenge their deaths by spending the rest of my life warring on all criminals." And hence, Batman is born. They have a comic in which you got Bruce Wayne playing with the chemistry set, and it says he becomes a master scientist.
Oh yeah, I like that because the imagery is like Bruce Wayne became super smart, and then it shows like him as like in a circus, like this massive,
he's lifted like a strong man.
Yeah, like in his leotard. It's like he became super strong, and he also learned kung fu, and so it's like he's now ready to be the Batman.
Well, no, the best part is whenever he's sitting around and he's thinking, he says, as before he decides to become Batman, he says, "Criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot, so my disguise must be able to strike terror into their hearts. I must be a creature of the night, black, terrible, and then a bat flies through his window. He goes, "A bat! That's it!" And so he decides to be Batman because a bat flies in his window.
Like what if he saw a little, ladybug or something?
We'd have Ladybug Man.
So, hence Batman is born. The rest of the issue is kind of weird. He fights a giant dirigible of doom that has like a death ray attached to it. It's like piloted by this mad scientist named like Dr. Kruger. And what I love about that is this flying Zeppelin thing shows up and it starts zapping people with its death ray. And so Batman's thinking about it and he's like, So he looks in his file cabinet and he finds a file for this guy, Dr. Kruger, and he's like, "Oh, Dr. Kruger, he builds death rays." And so he knows that, okay, it's Dr. Kruger that's the bad guy. He goes and beats him. That's pretty much it. I mean, the origin story doesn't really come into play in this comic. I think it was just kind of it's like a marketing thing, I guess. You want to...
So later on, do they touch more about the origin of Batman and like his parents, or is that like?
Oh yes.
A little bit more. Yeah. One thing I did want to point out in this comic, they actually weren't in Gotham City. They were in Manhattan.
Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah, it was kind of cool. And also, Bruce Wayne still smokes a lot, and and also it was kind of funny. So he hops. So Batman's like, "I got to get there," or whatever. And so he's driving just like a regular car down the highway. Like, how would you feel if you're at a stoplight and look over and see Batman like in a regular car? And
and this is also the one with the bat plane. Right?
Yeah. It looked weird, man. It looked more like a helicopter. But
well, it looks like a like the Snoopy airplane, like
a bi-wing or what are they called?
Yeah.
A biplane?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Actually, but no, it does have like a helicopter. It has a propeller on top.
Yeah, at the top. So I was like, what is this? It was goofy. Man, it was weird. But it was kind of fun. But I think the next comic that we read was probably my favorite, really old school one, where they go a little bit more into Batman's origin story.
Yeah. So this one is Batman number 47. So this came out a while later, I think because the first two were from 1939. This one's from 1948. So this was about 9 years later.
Actually, I really liked this story. To me, it felt like the most updated. I guess it felt like a modern day comic where it didn't feel rushed, and it actually told a pretty neat story. Where the other ones were like, "Oh, Batman saves the day."
Yeah.
This one, it did explain his origin story. How, like you just said in the previous comic, his parents were shot. He's sad, as he should be, and he basically says, "I'm gonna stop crime." And then they had the same scenes, like, "I'm gonna be smart. I'm gonna be the world's strongest man. I'm gonna fight crime." And then what I thought was cool is so they got the mugger that killed Bruce Wayne's parents actually became a pretty big mobster, basically, in Gotham. And so Batman...
Joe Chill is his name.
Yeah, Joe Chill. I was like, man, really? That's the guy's name?
Well, and they use that in Batman Begins. Because remember, so I don't know if y'all remember the scene in Batman Begins where he's on trial or whatever, and then Bruce Wayne goes to kill him, but instead one of the mobsters from the big mob boss or whatever goes to assassinate him. So he never gets the chance to kill Joe Chill, and so that's whenever his quest for vengeance becomes, instead of getting revenge on Joe Chill, it just becomes a fight against crime in general, since he can't kill the guy who killed his parents anymore. But this one turns out a bit different, right? Because he sees a mugshot of Joe Chill, the guy who murdered his parents, and he immediately remembers that, hey, that's the guy that killed them. I remember. I remember his face. So he kind of, embarks on this quest to encounter Joe Chill, right? And it's a little bit complicated. They have the part whenever because he goes and he kind of intimidates a guy who works for Joe Chill, and you saw the part whenever he's in a scuba gear, right? Because this guy who's trying to chase after is on this boat, and so Batman's wearing the scuba suit, and on top of his head there's
he's like a duck, right? He's trying to get to the yacht of Joe Chill, and he's swimming. Yeah, I was like, man, that is corny as hell, but but it was kind of cool. And he eventually, one thing, it was kind of funny, sort of. So he finally confronts Joe Chill, and he says, "You don't remember me," and he basically says, "You killed my parents." And he unmasks himself, and he goes, "I'm Bruce Wayne. You killed my parents." And Joe Chill was like, "I can't believe it." And then I can't remember. Does he apologize basically? And then his Batman lets him go, right?
Yeah, Batman lets him go, and he kind of just says, "Oh no," he says, "Whatever you do, I'll be watching." So he basically he scares him, and basically thinking okay, now he's gonna live his life looking over his shoulder. And for this guy, he's like, man, I created Batman. That's crazy. So he goes and he starts telling people. He's like, hey, I know who Batman is. I killed his parents whenever he was a little kid, and he came up to me and told me who he was. And then the guys, the gangsters who he goes and tells, what do, Nick?
They shoot him. They kill him.
They say you created Batman, and they shoot him before he tells them who Batman
is. Smart Joe.
It was actually pretty funny. I guess we shouldn't have killed him. We should have heard who Batman really is.
We plugged Chill before he told us Batman's real name.
Look, he's still alive. Maybe he'll talk.
So Batman comes in and beats these guys up, and that's the end of it. But it actually is. You're right though, Nick. It kind of does resemble an actual story though, so that's a plus.
Yeah, it had a little more story elements to it. It was compared to the first two comics we read, it was a breath of fresh air. Yeah, and it wasn't there's Bruce, that socialite Bruce Wayne hanging out with Commissioner Gordon. Hey, Bruce, pass me the matches. Daddy needs a smoke. It was a little more realistic.
It's like just a giant advertisement for cigarettes.
Yeah. That's all comics were. It was like, hey kids, be cool and smoke.
So when you're reading these comics, is it really dramatic, like The Dark Knight Rises, or is it kind of just
some of them were the first three that we talked about? No.
So the first three. So you guys probably haven't seen the old Superman
Batman
cartoons, like the ones from the 60s or whatever.
No.
Or have y'all seen the Batman show, with Adam West, the cheesy one?
Oh yeah.
From the 60s.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Have you seen the scene where Adam West talks to himself on the phone, like he's Bruce Wayne talking to Batman, like he's on two lines and he's talking to himself in the same exact voice. He's like, "Oh, hey, Batman, this is Bruce Wayne. What can I do to help?" "Well, Bruce Wayne, this is Batman."
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous.
Well, okay, and actually, I do want to cover that another time because I actually love the '60s Batman because it's pretty much literally Austin Powers. Like it's supposed to be ridiculous and funny, and like it's kind of like a parody of comic. It's not really a parody of comic books, but it's supposed to be ridiculous though. And so I actually like those a lot. We'll cover those another time though, because that'll take a minute. But the next comic that we read is totally different, right? So we're jumping forward. So that was 1948. We're jumping forward almost 30 years, 1987. Okay, Batman Year One. Okay, now a couple things about this. This was written by Frank Miller. He's the author of Sin City and 300, which obviously were adapted into big movies. And he also wrote another super iconic Batman graphic novel called The Dark Knight Returns. That's about Batman coming out of retirement. Basically, he's like an old man, and he comes and Gotham's like kind of gone to hell, so he comes back and starts cracking skulls again. But Year One is like a super like grounded and gritty retelling of the Batman origin story that we kind of already covered in these early cheesier comics. And so this one's like definitely inspiration for the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, like the Dark Knight trilogy. So what do you think of this one, Nick?
Actually, I really liked it, and honestly, I thought it was neat how they set it up. So it starts off with Gordon heading to Gotham City to start his new job. I think he started out as a lieutenant. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, so, JP, do you know who Gordon is in the Batman series? Does that ring a bell?
Yes, it does.
He's the detective friend that the Batman has.
Yes.
So that was.
He's with him like when the bat light flashes up in the sky.
Yeah, right? And so he's like the Gary Oldman's character in the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. So yeah, it starts off with him though, right, Nick?
Yeah, and so he's basically saying, "Why am I taking this job? I'm about to have a child, and my wife's pregnant. And this city is a crap hole. I'm not really that good of a cop." And he knows how corrupt the police force is in Gotham, and that's pretty like one of the big storylines is how he's trying to change Gotham, but the commissioner and his partner are the whole police department is pretty much is corrupted. Yeah,
right?
Crooked.
Yeah.
And so like he's battling that, and then all his crimes happening, and the journalists and the newspaper people they love him. They love Gordon. He's the cop hero, but the cops don't like him. And they don't like him so much, his partner and some other guys actually jump him in a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually really liked Year One because it felt like a little bit more than half of it was about Gordon and how he struggled with everything.
Yeah,
and
it kind of just feels like it's like just a cop story. It's like a Martin Scorsese movie or something like that.
Yeah, and it was nice because, like JP was saying, Gordon, and you said this too, I mean, Gordon's kind of is the cop friend, but then, like, growing up, that's all you really see Commissioner Gordon as. He's a cop that turns on a light and goes, "Hey, Batman, looks like the Riddler's out again. Hey, did you know the Joker's on the loose? Go stop him." And that was kind of it. Well, in this, he had a lot more depth, and I didn't realize in this story, but he got kind of close and cozy with his female partner.
Yeah, we'll get to that because let's like talk about Batman's side first, then we'll kind of come to how things go at the end, right? Because you got two parallel stories. You got Gordon's story, and he has his own narration. So like in the comic, it's like it's red or it's yellow, right? Like his narration is yellow, and then you got Bruce Wayne's narration, which is in white. And he's kind of having a similar story, right? He's returning to Gotham after being around the world, like training in like martial arts and stuff like that. And he's decided that he wants to fight crime for a living. But he has a rough time too at first. Like the first thing that he does is he tries to go and he goes to like the red light district of Gotham basically, and there's this like 12-year-old prostitute or whatever that's trying to hit him up. And so he tries to confront the pimp basically and be like, hey, what's the deal? This is the little girl. And the pimp starts beating him up, and then all the prostitutes gang in on him and start beating him up too. And so he gets like the crap beat out of him by a pimp and a bunch of prostitutes, and that's his first excursion as a vigilante.
Yeah, and one thing I thought was neat is as time progresses, he figures out what he should do. Like he starts designing his costume, and he figures out how he should approach certain situations, and because he gets shot up a lot in year one, he gets shot in the legs and all this and that, and so he figures out how to approach criminals, when to fight them, and it really, I don't know why I never thought of this before, but Alfred will talk to him and is like, oh, are you not sleeping tonight, sir? And he's like, no, I can't. And so he gets zero sleep. So he's awake all the day as Bruce Wayne, and he fights crime like at between 2 and 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
And then he starts his day as Bruce, so he gets zero sleep. And I never really thought of it that way, but it's like, man, it's got to be tough.
Well, and I also love how it's basically the same origin story. Like even, so it's got it's a stick-up buddy, but of course he doesn't, the mugger doesn't say it like that. But it's told like really dramatically, like without dialogue, and then the same thing happens. He starts thinking about, hey, how do I, after he's beat up by the pimp and all the prostitutes, he gets back home, he's like, man, that didn't work. I gotta, intimidate these criminals a little bit, and so he's thinking about how to do it. And then a bat comes, not flying through his window, crashing through his window, and he sees it as like a sign,
He goes, by God, it's a bat.
Right. But like it's a lot more dramatic though, and it almost kind of seems more like a hallucination or something like that. So it's I don't know. It's just like it's the same story, but it's told in like a more grown-up way, I guess, or more like the author's taking it more seriously, I guess. So yeah, and next time we see him, he's Batman now. He's running around. Commissioner Gordon likes him, but obviously, no, he's not Commissioner Gordon. Lieutenant Gordon likes him, but the actual police commissioner, Loeb, I think is his name, obviously doesn't like him because,
he's breaking up like all his because Batman's breaking up all his gambling rings and like different things, like how they're getting all this extra income. And one thing I thought was kind of funny, Gordon was holding a conference in front of the other cops in the Gotham Police Department, and he says, "Oh yeah," it's a man," and then another cop goes, "It's not a man," and it was Gordon's old partner, what's his name, Flass?
Yeah, Flass.
Yeah, Flass, and they look over and Flass is in a neck brace and he's beat up, and basically they say that Flass tells the story of how he got a tip and was trying to stop something and he got beat up by accident. Well, really he was doing some crooked work trying to get extra money on the side, and he got beat up by Batman.
Paid off or something like that. Yeah, and then Batman busts into there's like a dinner with the police commissioner, the mayor, and then like a bunch of the mob bosses around town, because they're all kind of like, in with each other and all that stuff. And Batman kind of comes in. He's like, you're all in trouble now. Basically, like, this isn't your town anymore. This is my town. So yeah, then it's pretty much the rest of the comic is just building up the relationship between Gordon and Batman. There's the part whenever the commissioner wants Gordon to kill Batman because he's being chased. Gordon says no, but then the commissioner has the building that Batman's hiding in get blown up, but Batman escapes anyways. You also get Selina Kyle, Catwoman. She was one of the prostitutes that helped beat Batman up at the beginning. She gets kind of inspired by Batman running around, and she decides to, become Catwoman, like quit being a prostitute and become Catwoman.
And start stealing from people.
What's funny is that the cops, the crooked cops, blame the robberies on Batman. So she's not even getting credit for the robberies.
And then at one point, the press even said that Batman's assistant, Catwoman, and she's like, "What? Now I'm his assistant?" She's like, "This is ridiculous."
Yeah, and then the story kind of comes to a head whenever Batman gets this drug dealer to testify against Gordon's old partner, Flass, this crooked cop, and basically say that he's been paying off Flass and all that stuff, and that Flass is corrupt. And this is being prosecuted by Harvey Dent. Now, do you guys know who Harvey Dent is? Top of your head? Who's Harvey Dent?
He's Two-Face.
Yes,
Two-Face.
very good, JP, very good. Yeah, he's Two-Face, but obviously he's not Two-Face in this. He's just kind of he's the good guy before he became Two-Face. So Flass is fixing to be exposed as a crooked cop. Now, the commissioner, Loeb, he knows that Gordon wants this to happen, so he blackmails Gordon. Because, Nick, as you said, Gordon's got a wife, Barbara, and he's also got a son. But Gordon's been cheating on his new partner. What was her name? Was it like Essen or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was like Sergeant Essen. And then he like finds out her first name and starts calling her by her first name. He's like, I shouldn't do that. So they have pictures and say, hey, we caught you and the sergeant locking lips. You better keep your mouth shut. We'll tell your wife. And then Gordon's like, oh, okay. And then later Gordon just says, he tells his wife, like, hey, we need to talk. And then the next scene, obviously, it's the drug guy confessing and, like, you know, saying, yeah, Flass is bad. The next scene, it's Barbara on the phone. She goes, yes, I know about the sergeant. Thanks for the call. And it's because, like, obviously, so he told her, so it's like they can't blackmail him if he already told his wife. So
yeah, and they try to have the witness killed and stuff like that, but he survives. So, like, all of this, like, yeah, again, like, it seems a lot like a crime story, not like a superhero story necessarily.
right.
But what happens at the end of this is they decide, some mobsters decide to kidnap Gordon's family, right? His wife and son. So Batman kind of figures this out because he kind of does some snooping on some of the mobsters, and he figures out that they're trying to whack a snitch basically, and he figures that snitch is Gordon. So it ends with like they're chasing these dudes down that kidnap Gordon's family. Bruce Wayne is there, not dressed as Batman because it's like too early in the day, but he's wearing like a motorcycle helmet. So what happens is Gordon chases this gangster who has his son to this bridge, and they're fighting each other, and all three of them, Gordon, the gangster, and Gordon's infant son, fall off the bridge into the water. And then Gordon's son is rescued by Bruce Wayne. And Gordon, his glasses fell off during it, and he says, I'm practically blind without my glasses. So he knows that whoever saved his son is Batman. And he's basically telling him, hey, I can't see your face. I don't know what you look like. Do you think he's lying at that point, Nick, or do you think he's telling the truth?
I think he's telling the truth. I mean, I think for the sake of the comic, I wouldn't look too into it. So I think, I think Gordon is blind. He's like, I think he's blind as a bat.
So Gordon doesn't know that Bruce Wayne's Batman.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because actually, Bruce Wayne was a suspect early in the comic, and he had like a solid alibi, I guess. Yeah. They said he was like, having sex with models or whatever.
Yeah, he was out of the country. He was in a skiing accident and all this.
Yeah. So yeah, Nick, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Nick or JP, I hope that you read it someday.
No, okay. So really, the only exposure I've had to comic books have been through like movies and TV shows of like other people reading them. Like, for instance, Spider-Man at the beginning, they would have the comic books. Like, but I don't know. It just makes me, looking at the comic makes me want to have one of those, like a crisp, clean comic book in front of me, just so I can, I don't know.
Flip through the pages.
And look at the pictures.
But honestly, though, and for listeners who have never read a comic book, Batman Year One is a great place to start. Because, again, it feels like a movie.
Yeah, and it's pretty quick read, too. I mean, it's good.
All right, so on to the next one. We got The Killing Joke. Okay, now this one's a big deal. It was written in 1988 by Alan Moore. Alan Moore is the author of Watchmen and V for Vendetta, and also From Hell. So these are kind of, and he had like a big, if you're a comic book person rather than a movie person, he had a big, important run on like Swamp Thing, and he basically defined what that character was and all that. The Killing Joke came out the same year as another important storyline called A Death in the Family. Both of these star the Joker, and both of them are big, influential Joker stories. A Death in the Family is the comic in which the Joker murders Robin. Okay.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Robin was murdered.
Robin was murdered.
Holy
Joker
mackerel.
beat him to death with the crowbar. But the Killing Joke, and JP, this is where things get weird with Batman, because I'll kind of get into my feelings with the Killing Joke later, but it's important to read anyways, though, because it provides a popular origin story for the Joker. Now, a lot of people don't like that there's an origin story for the Joker. They tend to prefer him to be mysterious. Like in the Dark Knight, right? He gives two different stories about his past that contradict one another, like about how he got the scars on his face. And so a lot of people prefer the Joker to be a mystery, but this one gives a origin story for the Joker.
Yeah, and I actually really liked it because, you know, it makes you feel sorry for the Joker, and I feel like it added more character to him.
It makes him more human.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
So wait, is this when the Joker first appears?
No, Joker had appeared like way back in the 40s. So Joker's been a Batman villain for a long time. And so I didn't include the first Joker comic because, I mean, this isn't a Joker episode necessarily, but actually this origin story of the Joker was covered in Detective Comics 168. So this would have been like back in like the 60s, I think. It's revealed that the Joker is actually the same person as another older villain called the Red Hood. This guy who wears like a red helmet, he was another Batman villain. But the way that the origin story went was Batman was chasing the Red Hood, and the Red Hood fell into this vat of acid. Okay, if you've seen the Michael Keaton Batman movie with Jack Nicholson as the Joker.
I've probably seen some of it.
Okay, that's actually what they do a similar thing in that movie. But so the idea is that Batman created the Joker because he chased him into a vat of acid. So this kind of tells a alternate version of that story. But this comic is a big inspiration for Heath Ledger's Joker. Like some of the themes that Heath Ledger's Joker talks about is similar to this. And there's also an animated film of this that's rated R, an R-rated animated Batman movie. I personally don't want to watch it because it has an added scene in which Batman and Batgirl have sex, and I think that's weird.
Yeah, I think so too.
Right, this is animated?
Yeah, and because like Batman, and it's especially weird because Batgirl is Gordon's daughter, okay? So, and her name's also Barbara. She's named after, Gordon's wife, but so Batman's like a father figure to Batgirl, so it's weird. I don't like it. It's gross. Yeah. Whenever I first read this, I was in high school, and I thought it was awesome, okay? Because I was in high school, and I was like, hey, comic books can be badass and gritty and dark and all that stuff. And so I liked it, but I hadn't read it since then, and it kind of soured in my mind. I was kind of like, chill out, y'all. Like, comics, it's superheroes wearing tights and running around in capes. Like, it doesn't have to be badass.
Yeah, but it's pretty cool. I mean, it's got... And I mean, for one thing, even if you just look at the art of it, like that's one thing I liked about it. It's just it looked different, and it's had a certain edge to it that I think really stood out. And like especially the reds and the blood, like there wasn't a lot of blood, and I think that's what made you get drawn to it visually because it was like a deep red.
Yeah, it looks really nice, and especially considering that this was the year after year one, and the art is so much better in this book. All right, so Nick, opening thoughts on this one. What'd you think?
I thought it was pretty good. Like I said, I liked the artwork of it, and I thought it was the story was a little bit shorter and faster than I thought it was going to be, but I enjoyed reading the Joker's backstory. I thought it was neat that they added some depth to him, made him seem more personable, and it was just kind of gritty from the get-go, and And the Joker's henchmen, they were like some hideous like circus freaks, and that's what I thought was kind of cool about it.
Yeah, I was just looking at the commissioner.
Yeah, Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah, he had this like choker on. He was on a leash.
Yeah, he's being like prodded by like the little circus guys.
Man. And before that, I saw his daughter get shot and blood.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's dive into the story. Crazy. So it starts off with, so Batman's talking to Joker in Arkham Asylum, right?
Or what he thinks is the Joker.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's saying like, hey, we're gonna kill each other eventually if we don't stop. Like we need to settle our differences and all that stuff. And it turns out the guy he's talking to is not the Joker, because Joker has escaped. And so it shows the Joker kind of he kills the owner of this rundown amusement park, and he's gonna use it for something. And then Joker shows up at Commissioner Gordon's house, shoots his daughter Barbara, and his henchmen take Gordon away, and Joker starts undressing Barbara, and he's got a camera in his hands. And so at this point, you're kind of like, oh, like this isn't. I couldn't imagine reading this in 1988 or whatever and being like, oh, I thought I knew what comic books were. What's going on here? Joker's taking this girl's shirt off. Like it's really unsettling, I guess. Meanwhile, Batman shows up, in the hospital. Barbara's in the hospital now. She's alive, but she's paralyzed. So Joker's gunshot paralyzed her from the waist down. So she can't be Batgirl anymore. She knows it's Bruce. She knows that Batman's Bruce Wayne because she is Batgirl at this point in the story. And so Batman, he needs to go rescue Gordon now, right? And so while this is happening, JP just pointed to the panel where Joker is laughing and holding his head, and he's like, he has blood coming out of his eyes.
That's an awesome picture.
It's a pretty good,
Yeah.
good image there.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of panels where there's no dialogue. It's just like really cool and neat art, and I feel like this is like it's almost a work of art as opposed to just a typical comic book. That's one thing I really liked about it, was the way it looked and the feel of it.
Yeah, it's just like you look at it, it's just like insanity or chaos. Like,
yeah. Well, and I'm glad that you're pointing that out, Nick, because I guess I never really did appreciate the art of this comic book, but it really is great, especially for the time. I mean, nowadays a lot of comics look like this, but for that time, like it's something else. But so also we get Joker's backstory, right? So what's going on with Joker's backstory during, like, we get flashbacks, right?
Yeah, throughout the main story, it kind of goes back in time, and again, it's all about the color red, essentially, because the main color of the Joker's backstory is like browns and some tans. Like, it's very
it's like almost black and white.
Yeah, almost, except the color red. So the Joker, he's down on his luck. He's poor. He's living in an apartment with his pregnant wife. They're expecting their first child, and he's trying to be a comedian, and he's used to work for he was a lab assistant.
Company.
Yeah, and he worked in a chemical company, and he just thought he'd become a comedian, and apparently he wasn't cutting it, and he gets two mobsters pick him up at a bar, and they basically say, hey, we want to steal some stuff from this chemical place. You can help us out because we know you used to work there. And so he's drinking, and he finally says, this is all I have to do. And he said, yeah, you'll be set for life. And he says, okay, fine. So he finally agrees to it. And while they're at the bar, a police officer comes up with a picture to the bartender, a picture of the Joker in the past. And the police officer confronts him. And of course, the Joker's all nervous, like, oh, what? I didn't do anything yet. I mean, how can I help you? Turns out his wife was killed. This is one thing I thought was kind of stupid, but she died by trying to test out a new bottle warmer.
Yeah, she got electrocuted.
Yeah, she got electrocuted, and I thought, I mean, I know this is in the past, but it's like, really, they couldn't have like just ran her over with a car or something. Like, I thought that was like a terrible way for her to go. Anyways, of course, he's in shock, and he just can't believe it. Not only did he lose his wife, but he lost his first child, and so he's in a shock and a daze, and the mobsters are like, hey, we're really sorry, but we're still on for tonight, right? And so anyways, he says, yeah.
Well, he doesn't want to, but then
he doesn't want to, but
they're
they
like, look, buddy, we're gonna kill you if you don't do that.
They're like, you said you'd help us out, you're gonna help us out, we're not postponing this. Anyways, he says, well, how are we gonna do this? And he said, you're gonna walk in the company on the grounds wearing this, and it's a red pill. Basically, it's the red helmet, but it looks like a pill, and it's the mask of Red Hood. Anyway, so they go in the grounds of the chemical plant, and the two mobsters get shot by a guard. Batman shows up, and he chases the Joker, and the Joker can't really see anything, and he's like, I'm getting shot at, and he ends up falling into that chemical waste, and his skin turns white, and his hair turns green, and he starts laughing, and that's how he becomes the Joker.
Yeah, that's when you get that iconic, image of him, holding his head. Yeah, and that's his story, and like it's funny to see a normal guy kind of transform like that, because again, it sort of, humanizes the Joker a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And so you find out though that his whole plan with Gordon is to drive Gordon insane, right? So he captures Gordon, takes him to this carnival, and he's taking all these pictures of Barbara naked, and he's posted them all inside this dark ride that Gordon's supposed to ride on. And so they strip Gordon. They all these circus freaks. They put him on this roller coaster, and he goes on, and he sees all these pictures. And after it's over, Gordon is obviously horrified, but he's not crazy. Joker's whole plan was to drive Gordon insane, to kind of prove that, hey, anyone can go crazy if you just give them the right push, right?
Right.
And but so Batman shows up because Batman's looking for where they're at. He's kind of beating people up all around town looking for it, but Joker actually sends Batman an invitation at some point. And so, because his plan is for Batman to show up at this carnival, and Gordon has gone crazy, and so Batman has lost all hope in humanity, basically. But the plan doesn't work. Gordon's okay. Batman kind of beats Joker up, and while this is happening, actually Batman's chasing the Joker through like this fun house, and Joker gives this monologue about like how all it takes is one bad day to take a normal person and turn them into a monster, basically. And he talks a lot about like how the world is kind of just chaos and nothing matters, and there's no such thing as justice and all that stuff. You get a lot of ideas that have kind of like shaped the Joker as a character, I think, in this part. But then Batman kind of basically is arresting Joker, right?
Yeah, he catches him, and that was another thing. Was it in this one or The Man That Laughs? And they said do it by the book.
That was in this one. So Gordon, before Batman chases after him, he tells Batman that he has to do it by the book, otherwise Joker wins, right? So Batman kills Joker out of rage, then the Joker's proven his point that anybody could be bad.
Right. So Batman, like you said, chases the Joker through this fun house, eventually catches up to him and basically just beats him to a pulp. And that's where Batman basically has the same conversation he had to the imposter Joker at the beginning, saying, and these are two arch enemies that have fought each other for years. And this is one thing that also happened in the beginning. Batman in the Batcave says, how can I, somebody that's such a huge part of my life, how can I not know anything about them? And so that's what kind of starts the whole origin story of the Joker for the reader. And so the whole thing is these two guys don't really know anything about each other, but they're so similar. They're both, their origin story starts with a very dramatic and terrible experience, and they basically go crazy. One decided to fight crime, the other chose to become crime. And so at the end, Batman's talking to the Joker saying, we can't keep doing this. One of us is going to end up killing the other. And we basically says we got to stop doing all this crazy stuff. And then the Joker, he's subdued, and he tells a joke, and he says...
Well, so he says... What I love is, again, it's... In this part of the story, Joker is not laughing. He's, like, sad, which is, again, interesting. And he says, so Batman's all like, yeah, we could work together, we could rehabilitate you. And Joker says, I'm sorry, it's far too late for that. And at that part, he's drawn like a person, basically, not like not like the Joker. And he says, hey, it reminds me of a joke, right? And so he starts telling the joke. Do you remember the joke?
Yeah, he says there's two prisoners at Arkham, and they decide to bust out. And so they're leaving, and they get to the top of the roof of Arkham, and there's another roof that they can jump on for freedom, and it's at night, so it's hard to see. prisoner A jumps on the roof, makes and says, "Hey, come on, jump over," and the second guy goes, "No, I can't." He's like, "I won't make it," and he says, "Well, here." The first guy shines a light on a board that's connecting the two rooftops, and he says, "Hey, why don't you walk across that and you can make it over?" And then the second guy is, "What are you, crazy? You'll turn your light off right like before I get across. When I'm halfway over, you'll turn your light off." And then that was the punchline, because obviously they both are crazy, and so the Joker starts laughing, and then Batman
chuckles.
Yeah, he starts chuckling. They both start laughing, and then that's how it ends. And I loved that ending, because obviously Batman, the whole time he's like, I'm tired of fighting the Joker. I don't know anything about him. And then the reader learns a lot about the Joker, gives him some character and makes him seem like a real person. And then it really shows that they're really not that different after all, and that they really need each other. And even though they're arch enemies, it seems like there's a big mutual respect for each other, and that's what I like about how it ended and their whole dynamic.
Yeah, so that's stuff that I think I must have not appreciated whenever I first read it when I was a teenager, like I just saw it for like the twistedness of it, I guess, and but so now I'm grown and I read it, I see that side of it, and that kind of makes me like it. I liked it a lot more than I originally thought I would, because whenever I was texting y'all about it, I was like, yeah, the Killing Joke is gross, it sucks, I hate it. It does really bother me what the comic does to Barbara, because she is basically sexually assaulted by the Joker and then completely forgotten about. Like, her story doesn't matter at all, which is really messed up. But I mean, the stuff between Batman and Joker though is really cool, and so I like it for that. Yeah, I mean, that's the Killing Joke. It's definitely worth a read, regardless of, I guess, how you might feel about it. It's an iconic story, and, really influential on Batman and the Joker's characters. And also the artwork is great.
So after they, are laughing and stuff, I mean, what happens after that?
Well, you assume that Batman just kind of takes him to jail, and they just keep doing their thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what happens with Barbara, though, is she's paralyzed after this in the comics for a long time, but she works as Batman's sort of like eye in the sky. They call her Oracle. She's kind of his intelligence officer. She kind of tells him about crimes that are happening, and like his dispatch officer, I guess. But then recently, in the past few years in the comics, they've healed her, and now she's not paralyzed anymore. Now she's Batgirl again. So yeah, that's kind of what happens as a result of this. But yeah, let's move on to the last comic. This is another Joker-centric comic, The Man Who Laughs, which was written in 2005 by Ed Brubaker. Okay, so this guy, Ed Brubaker, he's a big deal. He writes a lot of crime and gangster comics, and you can definitely see it in this.
I thought the Joker was more violent in The Man Who Laughs. I mean, I know he was pretty rough in The Killing Joke, but he was shooting and killing and doing a lot more harm in this
he kills a lot of people in this one. And so this one, though, provides an updated first encounter between Batman and the Joker. So this one's actually a sequel to Batman Year One, because at the very end of Batman Year One, Gordon kind of teases the Joker. He says that someone's threatening to poison the Gotham water supply. He's calling himself the Joker. That's one of the last lines of Batman Year One. So this is a sequel to that, and it's told in the same style as Batman Year One. It bounces back and forth between Gordon's narration and Batman's narration. But this one, I like it a lot too, because this one also feels like a movie, I think. It reminds me a lot of the 1989 Tim Burton Batman movie with Michael Keaton. Jack Nicholson as the Joker.
This one actually reminded me a lot of Batman Begins. I felt like as this story develops, it felt a lot like because
Ra's al Ghul and the water supply.
Yeah. It was like they were trying to deal with the water supply, and it felt like the same type of thing, and it felt real similar to that. But it was I really enjoyed this one as well.
You said this one's your favorite, right?
I mean, I like this one. I like the three newer ones for different reasons. I really liked The Killing Joke with, the Joker's origin story, the art, and their mutual respect and how it ended. I really liked Year One because it focused a lot on Gordon and everything. And this one, I liked it. It was a fun, awesome, violent Batman story.
Like, it starts off, Batman find all these dead bodies that have like the creepy Joker corpse grin on their face, and so Joker's been they don't know who the Joker is at this point, but someone's been experimenting on people and testing this poisonous gas, and so then one day Joker shows up on TV. He's killed the news anchor that's kind of doing a story on Arkham Asylum, which is fixing to be reopened. And he jacks their broadcasting equipment and stuff like that, and he says, "Hey, I'm going to kill this guy at midnight tonight." And so then the cops go to protect that person, but then it turns out he's already been poisoned by the Joker, and he dies. He gets that Joker smile and dies. Same thing happens again to another character, and so Batman's trying to figure out, and Gordon are trying to figure out who this guy is, who's the Joker, how is he killing these people, and what does he want, right? So Batman figures out that both of these people who are killed at the stroke of midnight by the Joker are big time investors in Ace Chemicals, the company. So he investigates. He learns that the Joker is the Red Hood, so similar to the story that was in The Killing Joke, and figures out that Joker wants to poison the city's water supply. So then the next target is that Joker announces is Bruce Wayne, and so what does he do with this, Nick? What does Batman do with this?
He's in a weird position because he's like, well, obviously I'm gonna have a lot of people trying to guard me, but I really need to get away and be Batman. So he tries to be safe and everything, but then he still gets under attack, and he starts laughing, and everybody starts freaking out, like, oh, it's too late, he's been poisoned. But fortunately, he's been working on an antidote for the poison, and he has a medical team, and they say inject him, and then before he can become healthy, Alfred takes Bruce's body and puts him in the back of a vehicle, and they drive off in the woods, and that way Bruce Wayne can turn into Batman and go and chase the Joker.
So he goes to the Gotham water supply. He stops the Joker from poisoning the entire city with his poison gas, and saves the day. And so what I really like about this one, though, is that it makes Batman a detective, which is something that's lost a lot. Like he does a lot of detecting and solving, figuring out who the criminal is and what his plan is.
Yeah, and one thing I thought was cool was he did a lot of undercover stuff too. He had like a bunch of costumes and like fake noses, and he would act like a reporter, and he would go and do these things. So he was undercover, and so that way people are like, oh, what's Bruce Wayne doing here? Like he would act like a reporter at some places, and like a hippie and a janitor. And
it's a different side.
He did a little bit of everything.
You're not used to.
Yeah, and it was cool because he was a detective, and then he said, oh, this is why the Joker's. Because at first, like, is he just hurting these people like randomly, like selecting them at random? But then he realized kind of the pattern that Joker was taking and knew who was going to strike next, realized it was a poison, and really figured it out. And then, it was fun.
So again, I like this one. I don't love it. It's a solid, mystery story. I guess if I were to rank, because obviously I'm going to rank the first three comics down at the very bottom. But if I were to rank the more modern comics that we read, I'd probably put Year One at the top, then Killing Joke, then The Man Who Laughs. Because despite my problems with The Killing Joke, I think that the good stuff in The Killing Joke is really good, so I'll put that above The Man Who Laughs.
Yeah, I feel like I could, for me, it's pretty close, because I like Year One and The Killing Joke for different reasons, and so it's a very tight race for me, and then there's a few more steps, and then The Man Who Laughs, which I really liked, but I can't put it in that tier as the other two for whatever reason.
All right. Well, listeners, hope you enjoyed our talk about Batman this week. Now, there's plenty of other Batman graphic novels that I would like for us to read in the future, including there's the Batman The Long Halloween. That's a pretty long graphic novel, though. I think that we would probably want to do a book talk episode on that in the future.
The Long Halloween?
The Long Halloween, yeah. And there's also, because that one tells the origin story of Two-Face.
Can't wait for Halloween.
And then we also have Batman Dark Victory, which tells the origin story of Robin. And so those would be good ones for us to do in the future. But I think that we decided the next book talk episode is going to be Watchmen. Okay? So this was actually written by Alan Moore, the guy who wrote The Killing Joke. And Watchmen is a big deal. We'll talk about why it's a big deal. They got the HBO series coming out later this year, so this is a good time to catch up on it if you haven't read Watchmen before. And as for our regular feature next week, we're going to be talking about an anime called Neon Genesis Evangelion. Okay? Now, JP has never watched an anime in his life, right?
No, I've not watched an anime. I've watched part of it.
Wait, actually, did you watch that movie Paprika with us in college? The one about like the dreams and stuff like that? Do you remember that? It was a really weird one.
Well, no, what was I was doing? I was in my room doing homework or something, and y'all were watching it in the other room, and I was like, what in the world are they watching? It's like, are they,
And you come out and you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, what about you, Nick? You watched Dragon Ball Z. Did you watch any other anime?
I watched Gundam Wing a little bit.
Okay.
And a few other stuff. But yeah, I was mainly just DBZ.
Okay. Well, yeah, this will be an interesting one to do. Again, I can't guarantee that either of y'all will enjoy this show, but it's interesting, at least. So we're going to cover the full series. We're going to take 3 weeks to do it. So for the next episode, we're just going to be covering episodes 1 through 9. So if you're listening to this, that's what we're doing. I'm not going to spoil anything that happens in future episodes. We're just going to be focusing on episodes 1 through 9. Okay. So that's all we have for you for this week for What is Nerd. We have no book talk episode this week. So again, check your podcast feeds this coming Friday for our Neon Genesis Evangelion episode. But if you enjoyed what you heard, like us on our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter at WhatIsNerd1. And subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify if you haven't yet. Send us an email at winerdcast@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Or hey, even if you'd like to recommend us to cover something for the show. I've got a list of 100 things that we could get to, but I'm always open to new suggestions. That being said, that's all for this week. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you guys next Friday.